Hello and welcome to the Heat Check podcast, the Miami Herald's Miami Heat podcast. I'm David Wilson. I'm joined, as always, on the other line by our Heat beat writer here at the Herald. It's Anthony Chang. Anthony, what's going on?
Just here. We spoke about last week how the next time we recorded, we would kind of know
Yeah.
a better picture of where things stand
Yeah.
for the Heat, if they were going to need to play in the play-in tournament. We got that right. We do now know what's likely going to happen. The Heat will likely be in the play-in tournament.
Yeah. Miami, ugly loss tonight. We're talking Wednesday right after the Heat lost to the Mavericks. An ugly loss for Miami, and as you mentioned, it basically sends them into the play. And you were saying there's still one scenario out there where they can avoid it. I guess we'll touch on that at some point. But we'll pull up the standings right now just to run through the numbers. As we're talking, 2 games left. Miami is a game behind. Miami's in the 8th seed, a game behind Philly, 2 games behind both the Magic and Pacers, who are tied 5th and 6th. So barring, like you said, one scenario, essentially, Miami is headed to the play-in. It was a concern basically for the entire second half of the season where they never could. They kind of exceeded, I think, maybe even the expectations we had in the first half of the year, but in the second half, combination of injuries, some trades that, clearly took some time to kind of make their mark on this team. And as we'll talk about, just Jimmy Butler, this is the time of year when he's usually great, and he has not been great down the stretch. It sends the Heat to the play-in all likelihood for the second year in a row. Again, I don't want to risk doing what Barry Jackson and I did last year, where we talked in inevitabilities after
let's not do that. No, let's not
went down to the Bucks. But it's hard to feel good about the Heat. It has been hard to feel good about them for most of the last couple of months, barring like a good spurt here and there. But the problem is that this team all season long, it's been very rare that we've had like back-to-back weeks where we've come on here and felt good about this team. And it's really, the East, the top of the East is not great, but the East is much deeper, at least like 3 through 8 basically, than it's been in a long time. And you felt that this year where, I don't know, I was waiting for Orlando to fade for a lot of the year. I was waiting for Indiana to fade for a lot of the year, especially with Tyrese Halliburton hurt. And none of that ever happened. And it looks like the Heat's headed to the play-in.
Can you remember the Heat's best win this season?
No, what was the win? Yeah, like the Knicks game last week was like, that's the best win of the year.
They were missing OG and Julius Randle. They have not been many good teams this year. I think they were like 0-10 against the top 5 in the NBA. They lost against a really good Dallas team tonight by double digits. Mm-hmm. This is the 18th game this season that they've scored fewer than 100 points in. Only the Hornets, Blazers, and Grizzlies have scored fewer than 100 points in more games than the Heat this season. Those are 3 of the worst teams in the NBA. Their offense just isn't good enough. It just isn't good enough unless Jimmy Butler turns into Michael Jordan. It just has – and that's what the Heat shooting threes, not at an elite rate, but at a respectable rate, better than last regular season. And their offense has still been bottom 10 this year. It's just hard to compete with the best teams in the league, especially in such a high-scoring NBA today, when your offense can't score many points consistently, when you're struggling to score. The only reason the Heat is even in a play-in tournament and has a winning record is it has a top 5 defense. It has the 5th best defense in the NBA this season. Their defense has been very good for the most part, especially against bad or mediocre teams. But against really good teams, their offense it's just not good enough to compete at this point. Maybe Jimmy turns it on, flips a switch. I know we've been waiting that for all season. He's kind of been struggling lately. Teams have been packing the paint, making it really hard on Bam and Jimmy. I don't know. It's hard to just predict, okay, Jimmy's just going to flip a switch again. That was unprecedented for a reason, what happened last year. And you can't count this Heat team out. They've earned it, right, at this point. Like, we can't count them out until they're actually done. But they have they have a lot of issues, and they're running out of time now with 2 games left in the regular season. Probably the play-in tournament next week, and then if they get past that, it's going to be a tough first-round matchup no matter what. I guess you could get a Bucks team without Giannis if Giannis isn't healthy, but if you face Boston in that first round, considering the motivation Boston's going to have after what you did to them last season, that is going to be a really, really tough matchup for this Heat team, especially with how they're playing right now.
Yeah, there's a difference, I think, between, last year, the Jimmy, as you mentioned, that run was unprecedented. Like, no one could have expected that. But we spent a lot of time last year saying this is like the best season of Jimmy Butler's career, right?
Right.
Like, he wasn't playing the number of games, but
he was to your point, he was all NBA second team for the first time in his career last year. It was arguably, if you go by that, the best season of his career. So yes, you're right.
So this would be even more unexpected, or if he turns it around like this. I was curious because obviously everyone thinks about what he did in the playoffs. I was curious. I didn't remember really what he did at the end of the regular season. He kind of limped in last year too, if I remember correctly.
I don't remember like the final few weeks, but I know after the All-Star break he was awesome.
And I just pulled up his game log from last year. He played 12 games in the last month of the regular season, averaged 26.6 points, 6 assists, and shot 61% from the field.
Pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good. He's obviously not doing that right now. Like,
no.
You can talk about flipping the switch, but it's very hard to go. And it's very hard to go from, I don't know what his numbers have been, but they obviously have not been that. Very different to go from what he's been to what he was last year. You go from 20, I don't know what he averaged in the first round of the playoffs last year, but
like 30 something. Yeah.
Yeah, like 20. All right, he was already playing great. He flipped the switch, but he was already playing great. So flipping the switch took him to like top 3 player in the world level. Really hard to get to that level if you're, right now I don't think anyone would say Jimmy Butler was, he's not sniffing an all NBA team, right? Like he has not been one of the, I don't know, 20 best players in the league this year. And yeah, this team has always kind of been, like you said, the defense is great. But this team has always kind of been holding it together with like paper clips and bubble gum on offense. And so much of that is that you've got Jimmy Butler. And that was so much of the faith about what this could look like. And, it's a really lofty burden to put on. Like we're saying, if he's not Michael Jordan, this team's in trouble. But, it kind of is true right now. And Tyler Hero obviously being hurt for so much of the last stretch of the year.
Yeah.
That is like, that's your prediction at the start of the year was he was going to lead the team in scoring. And it really looks like he was going to
he still might, actually.
He might, yeah, I guess,
yeah.
Points per game.
Right.
They've been missing that guy. He's inarguably one of their 2 best offensive players, I think. Bam's obviously a different kind of guy, but definitely one of their 2 best scorers. And so with Jimmy not playing incredible, everyone has to step up a little bit more, and then you're missing your second guy, and the puzzle does not fit together right now.
Yeah, I think you mentioned injuries, and that does have, you do have to talk about that because I think that is honestly probably the story of the season. This is the most injured season in Heat history. I mean, considering they've used the most starting lineups in Heat history in a season, they have the 5th most missed games, just all the different, all the inconsistencies. Some of that is just guys, like at some point it's like better just to have a guy out for the season as opposed to like different guys coming in and out at different times. Like it's hard to build any kind of quote unquote identity or consistent like plan when Terry Rozier's out one game, then Tyler Hero's out for 6 weeks, and then Jimmy's out for 2 weeks, and then Bam is out for a week, and then Caleb Martin's out for 2 weeks, Kevin Love is out for a month. It's just it's not an excuse because again this team should be better than what it is right now, but it is a real explanation for what they've been dealing with this year. They'll probably admit to some of it after this is all done, like the injuries took a toll on them. They won't say it now, but it's unavoidable. It's hard to overcome that many absences, that many different starting lineups. But to your point about Jimmy, there's one thing that I just keep noticing, and again, I don't know if it's him going to be 35 in September or maybe the right foot is bothering him, maybe he's hurt. I don't know, at this point. But in the last 5 games, not only is he shooting 44% at the rim, which is not good.
Yeah.
He's gotten blocked a total of 8 times and a total of 5 times at the rim. In the playoffs last year, he was blocked a total of 6 times through the whole playoffs, and he was not blocked at all at the rim. Did not have one shot blocked at the rim all last postseason. I mean, that kind of tells you everything you need to know right now, how Jimmy's playing and kind of what's going on. They need Jimmy to be an all-NBA player for this team to really reach its max potential. And he hasn't been that this year. And I think we're all just waiting for that, again, for him to flip the switch, but I don't know if that's going to happen right now. Again, whether it's injury, whether it's, guys, he's had a lot of deep playoff runs in recent years, a lot of mileage. He plays a very physical style, a lot of fouls he takes. I don't know. But you can't argue the numbers right now and kind of what they're saying.
Yeah. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if he flips a switch, but it's not going to be to that. I'd be stunned if it's to that level. And, does that mean the Heat can't scare someone a little bit, right? If the Heat win their play-in against Philly, wherever it is, then you get the 7 seed. You play Milwaukee. If the Heat goes up 1-0 on them, the whole narrative, the mojo, the momentum, some flashbacks for Milwaukee, that's all going to start to come back a little bit. And it's not like Milwaukee's played great either. They've been a 500 team basically since the All-Star break, maybe even further back. So could this flip quickly? Could we come on? I guess not next week. When would the play-in be?
So here's another thing we should mention. If the play-in is in Philly, the Flyers play their season finale on Tuesday in Philadelphia.
Speaking of teams falling apart.
So the play-in game is scheduled for Tuesday. That's the first play-in game. But because the Flyers play Tuesday in Philadelphia, they'd have to move the play-in game if it's Heat Sixers in Philly to Wednesday.
Which is the current scenario.
Yeah. So it might be, instead of Tuesday, which we all thought it would be Tuesday because that's what it's scheduled for, the 7-8 game on each conference, it would have to be Wednesday because of a conflict in Philadelphia. So that's one thing to everyone know.
Who knows? Maybe we come back on next week and it'll be right after they beat Philly, and we're not going to predict them to beat Milwaukee, but we're gonna be saying all the you never know, and Milwaukee hasn't been that great. And
I'm sure Milwaukee doesn't want to see Miami either.
Yeah.
Even though there's no if we just do it in a vacuum, it's why wouldn't you want to play Miami at this point? But the history between the two teams, just like with Boston, and that's going to be a storyline that's going to be in the minds of both sides. It's going to be there. So and that's the thing too. Is if Boston's the only team, I think they're clear cut better than any team in the East, head and shoulders, probably the best team in the NBA. They've been dominant, but any other team, we say all this about the Heat's issues and all that. Any other team in the East, even Milwaukee with Giannis, who knows if he's gonna be available for that first round? You face a Bucks team that's struggling even with Giannis. Without Giannis, I mean, would you be shocked?
Their point differential is 0.32 per game. That's not very good.
They just lost.
The Heat are not that far off of that.
They just lost the Wizards, the Grizzlies. I think they had a lot of bad losses in a row there. And then Cleveland's been free falling, and the Knicks. I mean, the Knicks are good, but they're going to be missing Julius Randle.
Yeah.
After that, it's the Magic. You think the Heat can't beat the Magic in a series? It's weird because things do feel so bleak right now, and they aren't playing really well at this point. And there are kind of issues that they need to fix. But if they face anybody other than Boston, they probably have a shot. You say the East is deeper, but it's not necessarily better.
Yeah.
Because the drop-off is so huge between one and everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't want to get too bleak, like you said, because this could flip so quickly.
Yeah.
By the time we come on next week, we're not going to be optimistic, but we could be striking a different tone. But this team had championship aspirations, right, every year, and I think that is very difficult to envision. Would it be stunning to see the Heat in the East Finals again playing against Boston? It's
crazy to say,
surprising, but no, because of all the stuff you laid out, because Milwaukee hasn't been great, because no one, the Knicks are injured because you're not scared of Cleveland or Orlando or Indiana.
Honestly, Philly might be the second best
Yeah,
team.
Philly. Honestly, Philly probably is the second best team in the East. They were the second best team in the East before Embiid got hurt, right? Or second or third, and so the ceiling is not as high as last year, which we had talked a couple of months ago about how maybe the ceiling was a little bit higher, but they've run out of time to show that they can hit that theoretical ceiling. But the floor is still like not crazy to think that the floor of this could be winning a round or two, but like, does that mean anything ultimately in this East? It does get into the second round.
Yeah,
I mean, if you beat Milwaukee, it's nice, I guess, but again, we're still talking like, I don't know, it's equally as likely that they lose in the play-in because they were 4 minutes away from losing to Chicago in the second game of the play-in last year, and we'd be talking about how the Heat, and right now we'd be talking about how the Heat are definitely going to blow it up this offseason.
Yeah, no. At this point, if it's everything stands pat, and we'll talk about the different scenarios now to close the episode. Yeah. But if it stands pat, and they face Philly in that first play-in game on Wednesday in Philadelphia, they're gonna be probably 5-point underdogs at least, 4 or 5-point underdogs, I would think.
Especially Philly just beat them the other night.
Yeah, and in Philadelphia, with the way that Heat have been playing and the way Philadelphia has been playing,
and Philly fans, the way that I don't know if Heat fans feel the way that like some of like the national media will, where it's like Miami, they get hot at the right time, but Philly fans are going to feel that with Embiid back if they, they played well down the stretch here, right? If they beat Miami and get to draw a kind of confusing Milwaukee team, like Sixers fans are going to go into that play-in game feeling like if they win that game, like they have a very nice path to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden the Heat, if they lose that game, is facing probably either Atlanta or Chicago again in second play-in game, and okay, you win that.
The annual second play-in game, it feels like.
Yeah, you're gonna play that game in Miami. You're gonna play that game in Miami. So let's say you win that game, you're gonna face Boston in the first round again. That's a team you don't want to face. That team will be rested. They have been dominant. They're a lot better than last season with Drew Holiday and Porzingis. You want to face any other team except Boston. And the way things are setting up right now, if things go as point spreads go, I would say, like if all the favorites win, the Heat would be facing Boston. That's kind of the situation they put themselves in. Obviously, they have a week to change that and try to create a more favorable path for themselves by either somehow getting out of the play-in, which looks very, very unlikely, and a lot of things have to break their way, or beating or winning that first play-in game, whether it's against Philly or Indy or somebody else. They could avoid Boston, but again, as of now, it looks like that's the most likely opponent if you just play it out over the next week.
All right, before we close this thing out, then let's run through the scenarios. You said there is one path for Miami to get out of the play-in. What has to happen in these last two games?
Yeah, I made a mistake on Twitter. I put two different scenarios, but one of them actually didn't work. I made a mistake. So the one scenario, there might be another one, but that one is probably so unlikely, like 4 or 5 things need to happen. The one that's like the cleanest, I guess, it's not even clean, is the Heat win their final 2 games, which is 2 games against the Raptors, which they should win. Both are at home.
Yep. Although Miami, 20 and 19 at home this year, that hurts a lot.
Yeah, but the Raptors, I mean, I think the
Raptors are terrible.
16 of 18 or something like that.
I know.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm just looking at what the hell went wrong with this team. Like that, that's going to be on the list.
For sure. So Heat win those 2 games against Toronto. That's number 1. The Magic loses out. Their 2 games are against Philly and Milwaukee.
They lost to Milwaukee tonight.
Yeah.
Kind of got smoked by Milwaukee tonight.
They did. So I don't know how much motivation Milwaukee will have on Sunday, right? At that point, it might be just...
Yeah, they're probably locked into the 2 by then.
So I don't know. Again, the Magic might just be playing a totally different Milwaukee team.
Thanasis and friends.
So that's tough to envision. But if the Magic lose those final 2 games, the tricky part about this is the 76ers also have to lose one of their final 2 games. But it can't be against the Magic.
Against the Magic?
So they have to beat the Magic on Friday and then lose to the Nets on Sunday.
Which is pretty unlikely.
Again, very unlikely.
Especially they are going to be playing for something in that Brooklyn game.
Right. They'd be playing
because they can still get out of the play-in.
It could get out of the play-in, yeah. They're, I think, one loss.
They're a game back of Orlando and Indiana and play Orlando. So
right, if they beat Orlando, then all they need is Orlando to lose one more time, and they're out of the play-in. Or India would need to lose 2 times, I think.
Yeah, Indiana.
Because,
I don't know.
India has a tiebreaker, I believe, the head-to-head tiebreaker. So it's unlikely Philly gets out of the play-in, but there's more of a chance for that than the Heat getting out of the play-in at this point. I think the focus really should be, and for myself, selfishly as well, because I don't want to travel as little as possible. The focus should be on hosting that first play-in game. That's the more likely thing.
Yeah.
And for that to happen, he needs to win out. He needs to win out again, and basically Philly needs to lose one of their final 2 games. So that Magic game, Philly will be favored in that game. They've been playing really well. But the Magic will be playing for something. The Magic right now are playing for playoff seeding. They're in a kind of bunched up there in the middle of the East in the 4 or 5 seed. They're trying to avoid the play-in. So the Magic will have some motivation. If the Heat can win out and Philly loses one of their final 2 games, the Heat will be the 7th seed. Which again, it's a big difference of playing Philly in Miami, which I know their home record isn't great, but still, you'd rather face Philly in Miami
certainly.
than have to face them in Philadelphia. So I think, yes, it's still possible they can avoid the play-in tournament, but the thing that really should be the focus at this point is just trying to host that first play-in game, because that's the more likely thing.
Southeast Division title also in real jeopardy as we go into the last week of the season here.
I would have told you Orlando might be the division winner.
I mean, again, like all these teams other than Boston and Milwaukee and Philly and Miami, because of how strange their seasons have been, are like ultimately irrelevant in the title landscape. But the story of the East, again, this is all irrelevant in the grand scheme of the NBA, but story of the East to me has been a lot about these teams that I kind of just was waiting for them to fade all year. And, this year, New York and Indiana and Orlando, they were all more resilient than the Heat, essentially. It's not like the Knicks, they've been missing Julius Randle for the last month of the season or whatever. Tyrese Halliburton missed a lot of time.
They've had Jalen Brunson, who's been an All-NBA guy.
Yeah, exactly.
That's again, Jimmy and Bam are great players. They're all-star. Bam was an all-star. Jimmy, when he's playing up to his level, is clearly an all-star. But they have not been All-NBA guys this year. And when you don't have an All-NBA guy, it's hard to really be a true contender. It really is. And it's really kind of simplifying things to, and it's more complicated than that, but that's really the bottom line. You need top end talent. And Bam has had a good season. He's been, I think, he might even get my defensive player of the year vote. He's been great on defense.
Yeah.
But offensively, it's been up and down. It has been up and down. Efficiency has been down. I know he's incorporated the 3, but his mid-range shot efficiency has been down. His rim attempts have been down. His rim efficiency has been down. Jimmy, obviously, we've talked about, just not the same top end games that he's had, the last 4 years, this year. So I don't know what was, I think, and this has been a reoccurring thing against really good teams. Kyrie and Luka combined for 54 points, and Jimmy and Bam combined for 20.
Yeah.
It's just hard to overcome.
It's kind of silly how easy it can be to sum things up sometimes, because how many other C stories for the Heat have been major successes, right? Like the Jovic emergence, obviously Jaquez, the role players across the board have been
Haywood's been
Haywood, Highsmith, the role players across the board have been B+, some A- stories in there. But yeah, the 2 stars plus Hero, and then obviously that's mostly injury related with him, but the 3 guys who were supposed to be your quote unquote big 3, they got 1 all-star out of them, and that's it. Bam, like you said, maybe he'll be he'll certainly be high in defensive player of the year, first team all defense, I would guess. But he's not gonna be all NBA. Jimmy's not all NBA. Yeah, and neither of them are really even sniffing it. And obviously, it would be different if this team had a better record. But the reason this team doesn't have a better record is because those guys haven't sniffed that level that we've seen from them in the last couple of years. Like you said, Bam defensively, like maybe the best he's ever been, but offensively, um, he's not supposed to be your number one, and he hasn't. He's never been even a great offensive number two. So not surprising with him, but the Jimmy component is, yeah, like you just wonder, is it age? Is it, last year this run obviously took a toll. We saw the same thing happen after the bubble, where then the next year, it was a really disappointing season for the Heat. But then, of course, the run last year came a year after a crazy run he had the postseason before. So, eventually those miles all add up, especially when you hit your mid-30s.
And I think we should also mention before we get out of here, Duncan Robinson's injury. He's out again because of the back. He missed 5 games.
Yeah, there's another
back for 5 games.
Another like home run story for this team that he.
Yeah, he's been awesome this year.
Yeah,
honestly, at times he's been holding it all together offensively. Like he's been one of their best offensive players. He was, he had been pretty durable up until this point. Now that he's out, and honestly, when we spoke with him, and when did we speak with him in Atlanta? Yesterday, actually. Man, it feels like a long time ago. It was yesterday morning. It didn't sound great. He's like, we're back to basically square one now. Like, we've already exhausted all of our options for treatment. It's just about like giving it rest. We'll see how I feel. There's no timeline for my return. He already had missed like a week or two with the injury. He came back, clearly wasn't himself, was not playing well. Now is out again. Will he be back next week for the play-in? I don't know. At this point, it's so up in the air, and backs are very tricky. And that's not a good injury to have, obviously, for any athlete. Him being out is a huge loss. I mean, this team is a better offense, clearly, when he's out there. He's one of the biggest triggers. Him and Bam, his dribble handoffs with Bam are just creating space for Bam and Jimmy. Like, he's huge for the offense, and he had proven to be a more dynamic offensive player this year off the dribble and with his passing and finishing on the rim. So again, that just kind of ties into all the injuries that this team has faced. It's just never ending. It feels like when one guy comes back, another guy goes out. It's just been that type of season for this team.
Yeah. All right. I think we can close things out there. We'll be back next week, obviously, maybe after a play-in game. Certainly there will be a lot of news to get to next week. Got any final thoughts?
No. I mean, I think.
Do you have a favorite cheesesteak place? Are you getting ready?
I don't want to think about that right now. After just coming back from a long trip.
I know, yeah. And you weren't even at the game tonight because you just got back from the road. So
I told my wife today. I said, this is the time of year where I just leave the luggage in the bedroom, because it's just gonna be just like last year was like in and out. Like, come back home for a game or two, leave again, come back home for a game or two, and it's just there's no use in putting it in the garage or anywhere, because it's unpredictable. Like, again, you and I could be talking Tuesday night next week about a play-in game in Miami, or we could be talking on Wednesday night or Thursday morning about a play-in game in Philadelphia. So
we could be talking Wednesday, and you might be on the phone from Philadelphia getting ready to booking flights to Milwaukee.
Yeah, booking flights to Milwaukee for that weekend. So who knows, right? All we know is right now the play-in looks likely. It's gonna be very hard for them to avoid it. So
at least you're getting practice covering these play-in games.
Yeah, it's practice I don't want, though.
Practice I don't want either.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants it. You'd much rather have the 5 days to kind of regroup for the playoffs, right? It's not ideal. I know the Heat did it last year, where you're playing Friday and then playing the first playoff game on Sunday, and the Heat won that game, actually. But that's the reality for the Heat at this point, and we'll see what happens.
I can't remember last year, were they like, yeah, this was actually good for us? Did they try to spin it that way? That they're like, oh, we built momentum, or we were fresher, like.
They always try to spin it.
I know they tried to spin it. I can't remember if they did last year, because it's not even like they played well in the play-in last year.
Oh, they almost lost. I mean, Max Strus needed to score like 30 points for them to escape that game against Chicago, and then they go and Giannis gets hurt in game 1, and obviously everything changed, and Jimmy again turns it up, and the rest is history. But Yeah, and that's going to be a storyline this year if they got out of the play-in, right? It's going to be the same thing until they're done. And again, they've earned that. I'm not going to poo-poo on that like type of thinking because they've earned it. Not only last year. Last year was the most improbable run, but the bubble run. Nobody expected them to get to the finals that year. Got to the finals. So when they were the 1 seed, obviously they were expected to get deep into the playoffs, but still they went to the conference finals. So
going into that year, no one thought they were.
Right.
The year before they had gotten swept out of the first round by Milwaukee.
Right. Yeah, nobody thought they would be a top seed in the East that year. So through the last 4 years, during this Jimmy Butler Bam era, they've been the most successful team in the East, even though they haven't won a title. They've been the most consistently great team. So they've earned the benefit of the doubt until it doesn't work. So we'll see what the next week or two holds.
All right, you guys can follow Anthony on Twitter at Anthony_Chang. Follow him there for his travels around the Eastern United States over the next couple of weeks. See where his adventures take him. You can follow me on Twitter at DBWilson2. Anthony, I'm covering a couple of Panthers games in the next week, so maybe next week. Well, I guess their playoffs will basically be set when we talk next week too. So maybe we'll do a sneak a Panthers minute in potentially.
Their playoff match series will be set then, like just like that, clean, like their first round opponent will be set.
Yeah.
That's not
the good old days, right? That's what it was.
I know. But
although I'll say, even in the good old days for the Heat, they haven't had a normal end of the season since I've been around. Between the play-in the last 2 years, I guess the year they got swept by Milwaukee, the 1 seed. Yeah, that's true. Those 2 years, because the bubble obviously was weird. The year before, they got eliminated on the last day of the regular season, right?
Like final days, like final week.
Yeah.
The Wade year, I think, like the Wade's final year.
Wade's last year, right?
They got eliminated.
The second to last game because the Brooklyn game was meaningless. Yeah. But yeah, so it's always been eventful. It seems to, at least. All right, thanks again for listening. We'll talk to you guys next week.